You're standing in a parking lot. There's a car a few rows over, low and wide and loud. And even before you see the badge, your brain already knows. Something about the shape registers before conscious thought catches up. You feel it before you name it. That car is the Ford Mustang, and the fact that you recognized it before you were even trying tells you something important about what this machine actually is. Because the Mustang isn't just a car, it's a signal, a cultural artifact baked so deep into the American nervous system that it bypasses logic entirely and goes straight to something older. Ambition, freedom, speed. And the strange thing, the part that most people never think about, is that this car was almost never built, and that the version you just recognized in that parking lot is the product of more than 60 years of contradiction, near-death, and reinvention. The story of the Mustang is the story of how something iconic survives itself. It starts, as most surprising things do, with failure. In 1962, Ford was nervous. The company had just endured one of the most embarrassing product launches in automotive history with the Edsel, a car so universally mocked that the name became a synonym for corporate arrogance. Ford needed to read the market better. They hired researchers, they studied demographics, and what they found was a wave coming that nobody in Detroit had fully understood yet. The baby boomers were turning 18. Millions of young Americans, raised on post-war optimism and disposable income, were entering the car-buying market, and they did not want their father's car. Lee Iacocca understood this. At the time, he was a young Ford Division vice president, ambitious and politically savvy, and he pushed for something that terrified the conservative executives above him. A car aimed at youth, priced for youth, shaped like a dream. His early concept sketches imagined a two-seat sports car. The accountants killed the two-seater. They said it was too niche, too risky. So Iacocca's team pivoted. They kept the look, kept the hunger, and added a back seat. A four-seat sports car, something you could actually sell. The Mustang launched on April 17, 1964, at the World's Fair in New York City. In the first year, Ford sold 418,000 units. They had projected 100,000. Dealers were overwhelmed. People were sleeping in showrooms to make sure they got theirs. The sociologist Vance Packard, who had studied American consumer psychology in his landmark work The Hidden Persuaders, could have predicted it. The Mustang wasn't being sold as transportation, it was being sold as identity. And identity sells faster than utility. But here is where the story gets complicated. Success for a product like the Mustang is a kind of slow poison, because the market responds to success by demanding more of it. More power, more features, more size. And through the late 1960s, Ford gave the market exactly what it asked for. Each year the Mustang grew. Wider body, bigger engine options, more weight. By 1971, the car that Iacocca had described as a secretary's car that could also satisfy a driving enthusiast had become a bloated land yacht with an optional 429 cubic inch engine that could barely fit under the hood. The original Mustang weighed about 2,400 pounds. The 1971 model crept past 3,500. The automotive journalist and historian Carl Ludwigson wrote extensively about this phenomenon in his research on American performance cars, that the pony car segment, which the Mustang had invented, was destroyed partly by the very manufacturers who created it, chasing their own success into excess. The car had eaten itself. And then the world changed. The 1973 oil crisis didn't just raise gas prices, it restructured what Americans thought a car was for. Overnight, big engines became embarrassing. Insurance costs on performance vehicles had already been climbing steeply through the early 70s, as actuaries noticed that young men in fast cars produced staggering accident rates. The combination of fuel prices, insurance costs, and new federal emissions regulations didn't just slow the Mustang down, they nearly ended it. In 1974, Ford released the Mustang II. And if you know anything about Mustang history, you already know what's coming. The Mustang II is almost universally regarded as the low point. It was smaller, lighter, and slower. It was built on a Pinto platform. The most powerful engine option in its launch year produced 105 horsepower. The original 1964 Mustang's base engine had produced 101. A decade of supposed progress had produced 4 additional horsepower. Enthusiasts were furious. Magazines were brutal. But here's what's counterintuitive. The Mustang II sold. It sold very well. Because Ford had actually read the moment correctly. The people who needed a small, efficient car in 1974 bought a Mustang II and felt good about it. The car served its moment. It survived. The third generation arrived in 1979, and with it, something important happened. Ford hired aerodynamicist Jack Telnack to lead design. Telnack had been working in Ford's European studios, where the design language was cleaner and more aerodynamically considered. The 1979 Mustang, built on the all-new Fox platform, had a longer hood, a cleaner roofline, and a shape that looked like it was moving even standing still. The Fox body Mustang would become one of the most modified, raced, and beloved platforms in American performance car history. It would stay in production for 15 years. What makes the Fox body remarkable, in retrospect, is that it gave the Mustang something it had lost. A clear identity. Not the identity of excess, and not the identity of reluctant efficiency, but the identity of a lean, honest performance car. You could buy it cheap and go fast. Hundreds of aftermarket companies built entire businesses around making it faster. The community that grew up around the Fox body Mustang wasn't just consumers. They were co-creators. They loved the car hard enough to keep improving it themselves. And this is the thing that researcher and cultural anthropologist Grant McCracken, who has studied how brands accumulate meaning over time, would recognize immediately. The Mustang had become a platform for self-expression. Not just Ford's expression, the buyer's expression. That shift, from product to canvas, is what separates an iconic object from a merely popular one. By the 1990s, Ford was again at a crossroads. The Fox body had aged. Competitors were getting faster. The fourth-generation Mustang launched in 1994, designed to evoke the original 1960s fastback shape with a modern interpretation. The long hood returned. The aggressive haunches returned. The stance said, "I remember what I was." The enthusiast community responded with relief and affection. And then, just as the Mustang seemed to be settling into a comfortable middle age, Ford did something genuinely brave. In 2005, the fifth-generation Mustang arrived, and it looked like a love letter to 1968. Wide retractable headlights, long hood, fastback roofline. The design team, led by Jay Mays and Chris Theodore, had studied the original pony car so carefully that they could name the specific proportions they were reviving. This wasn't nostalgia for its own sake. It was nostalgia weaponized as design strategy. And it worked with an almost shocking completeness. Car reviewers who had grown cynical about American muscle wept slightly when they drove it. Sales jumped. The Mustang was culturally relevant again. But the most audacious chapter hadn't happened yet. In 2015, Ford did something that no one who had watched the Mustang's history could have fully predicted. They sold it globally, officially, for the first time. Right-hand drive Mustangs shipped to the UK, to Australia, to Japan. A car that had been created as the ultimate expression of American optimism in the 1960s was now being sold on every continent. And in those foreign markets, it became something fascinating. A symbol not of America exactly, but of a certain dream of freedom that had spread far beyond its origin point. Buyers in Germany and South Korea didn't want the Mustang because they wanted to be American. They wanted it because the shape said something they also wanted to say about themselves. And then, in 2020, the electric future arrived wearing a pony badge. The Mustang Mach-E is a fully electric SUV. It has 4 doors. It uses a Mustang name and a Mustang badge and a vaguely Mustang-adjacent aesthetic. On a vehicle that no one in 1964 could have imagined. The backlash from purists was immediate and loud. To call an electric crossover a Mustang, many argued, was a betrayal of everything the name stood for. But here's what the historian in you should notice. In 1974, people said a Mustang built on a Pinto platform was a betrayal of everything the name stood for. In 1979, people said abandoning the original proportions was a betrayal. Every generation of Mustang has been called a betrayal by the generation that loved the one before it. And every generation of Mustang has survived. Because the Mustang, at its core, is not a specific shape or a specific engine or a specific number of doors. It is a posture, a declaration. It is the automotive equivalent of saying, I am here and I intend to move. The sixth generation Mustang, launched in 2024, brought back the manual transmission at a time when most manufacturers were phasing it out. It brought back analog controls. It brought back the argument, loud and rolling and deeply unnecessary, that this car wants to start. It is still recognizable as the thing a young vice president fought for in 1962, which means it has outlasted every trend, every crisis, every near death, every reinvention, and arrived, still running, on the other side. So the next time you spot one in a parking lot and feel that flicker of recognition before thought catches up, know that you are not just recognizing a car, you are recognizing 60 years of survival. You are recognizing every generation that was told the Mustang was finished, and every generation that proved them wrong. You knew it before you were even trying, and that is exactly the point.